All right, let's dive into a pretty powerful and maybe a little controversial idea for when you feel like you're just being taken for granted in a relationship. It's a 5-step process called strategic distance, and it's designed to completely reset that dynamic. So let me ask you something and see if this rings a bell. Have you ever felt like the more available you are, the more you're there for someone, the less you're actually valued? Like your constant presence somehow makes you invisible? And this really lays out the two sides of the coin, doesn't it? On one hand, you're always there, which, can lead to you being predictable, taken for granted. Your efforts just don't seem to land. But on the other side, that's the goal, to be genuinely valued, to be appreciated, to have your efforts noticed, for your presence to actually matter. So the big question is, how do you get from one side to the other? Well, that's where this whole concept comes in. The idea we're looking at proposes a very specific strategy to deal with this exact problem. It's called strategic distance. So what exactly is it? Well, think of it as a conscious, deliberate step back, both emotionally and physically. The whole point is to reset the relationship dynamic, and that word strategic is key. The framework really insists this isn't about playing mind games or being manipulative. It's about creating intentional space, specifically in a situation where you've become undervalued, simply because you've been too available. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. The theory is that when you create this distance, the other person goes through a pretty predictable emotional journey. It's laid out like a 5-phase roadmap. And here's that roadmap. It starts with anger, moves into transition, then reapproachment, followed by provocation, and finally, it all leads to pursuit. This sequence kind of gives you a map of what you can expect to happen. So let's break each one down. Okay, first step, anger. And this one makes sense, right? It's that immediate gut reaction. You've suddenly changed the rules of the game. That pattern of you always being there is gone. And that disruption, it often triggers frustration, even real anger. But that anger is actually a sign that, hey, they've noticed. The pattern is broken. Once that initial flare-up of anger starts to cool down, you move into phase 2, transition. This is really a period of adjustment. It's where the new reality, your distance, starts to sink in. It's a much quieter, more internal shift as they begin to realize that, okay, things have actually changed. All right, phase 3, rapprochement. And you've got to pay attention here because this is a really critical moment. This is where they'll often try to pull you back into that old, comfortable dynamic. This might look like blaming you or trying to make you feel guilty for pulling away. It's basically an emotional pushback to get things back to the way they were. Now, if you can hold firm through that, you hit phase 4, provocation. This is all about testing you. They might start testing your boundaries to see if this new distance is for real or if it's just a phase. They're trying to see if you'll crack and go back to your old self. This is absolutely a test of your resolve. And if you can navigate that test, well, that's when the whole process comes to a head in the final and maybe the most transformative phase of them all. And that is pursuit. This is the moment the entire dynamic finally resets. The testing stops, and instead your partner starts to actively seek you out, to reconnect. But here's the crucial part. It's on new terms now. At this stage, they're no longer taking you for granted. They're re-engaging with a totally renewed sense of your value. There's a quote that just perfectly sums up the whole philosophy behind this. When absence redefines presence, value is restored. It's all about using that space not to push someone away, but to let your presence actually be felt and appreciated again. So we've walked through all 5 phases. Let's pull back and look at the big picture here. What's the real goal? What's the main takeaway? So why does any of this matter? Well, first, it gives you a model, a way to understand what might feel like a random, chaotic, emotional sequence. Second, the whole point is to purposefully interrupt a pattern of being undervalued. And maybe most importantly, it's about a huge shift in mindset, from focusing on just being available all the time to focusing on being genuinely valued. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. It's a question that gets right to the heart of how relationships can work. Is distance, sometimes, a necessary tool, not for separation, but for actually restoring a real, meaningful connection?